Does nature rejuvenate you? It certainly does me. And over the years, I've wondered if there might be ways of deepening that experience so I can take it with me in my daily comings and goings. I'd like to share what works for me. Maybe you can use some of it. I am not an inherently observant person. I have to make a deliberate effort to remain, as they say, present. But being present gives me a more vivid, more lasting contact with nature. So how to be present? Well, here are two things that work for me. First is what I call an exploration of context. And the second is some mindfulness meditation. Let me start with context. By this I mean answers to questions like, where am I? What is this place? What is here? Becoming familiar with at least some of these things can enhance an experience. So I try to get in the habit of learning about the place. Awareness of these background facts helps me to connect with where I am. You might want to start with the big picture. For example, the overall bioregion. Right now, I am in a temperate forest, in a transition zone between the oak hickory woodlands to the south and the maple beech forest to the north. That means there will be a particular diversity of plants, animals, and trees. Familiarizing myself with at least some of them helps me to connect with the spot. When I studied this area, for example, I noticed that it has some unique features. For one thing, the terrain is so difficult and treacherous that loggers of the last 175 years or so were unable to access all of it. The result is that there are still standing very large trees, remarkable old-growth giants. The valley itself includes cliffs hundreds of feet high. While the gorges date to the end of the last ice age, the rocks exposed on their surfaces date back hundreds of millions of years. There are things here which are very, very old. But appreciation of a wild setting does not mean that its human cultural heritage should be overlooked. In fact, awareness of the human factor often helps me to identify more closely with a place. I mentioned the loggers, but this particular area has many more human connections than that. It is now called the Zoar Valley and is located in western New York. I have not been able to find out exactly how it got its name, but Zoar is mentioned in the Bible as the place where Lot and his daughters initially sought refuge after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Could this valley have suggested a place of refuge to some? There are certainly enough hidden areas here that is entirely possible. But of course, the region was known to humans long before it got its present name. At one time, this was an area inhabited by an early tribe of Native Americans known to the original European explorers as the Cat People, because according to some accounts, they trimmed their clothing with panther tails. A couple of hundred years later, another curiously named group of humans called this place home, perhaps seeking refuge here. These were the Clawfoot people. According to the story, members of this group shared a genetic mutation that often resulted in deformed hands and feet. Apparently, this malady caused so much suffering that eventually they decided to put an end to their bloodline. According to the legend, they decided to forego having any more children. By conscious decision, they became extinct here in Zoar. It is little wonder with stories like that one, as well as the many accidental deaths which have occurred here, that while some people call the area hauntingly beautiful, others call it just plain haunted. Okay, so now I have at least some understanding of where I am and a little of its natural and human narrative. I'd then like to turn to a technique which I borrowed from the world of mindfulness meditation. Why? Because the moments I've spent engaged in this mental activity are so vivid that they help me reconnect with my experiences in the wild long after they are over. Now, as I understand it, mindfulness meditation requires a shift in mental activity from the kind of analysis and study involved in, say, understanding context, to a focus on the present moment. In order to achieve this mindfulness state of mind, I like to use a procedure which involves attending to the breath. The technique includes closing the eyes and focusing on the sensations of breathing, the in-breath and the out-breath. Now, breathing is good, of course, but it is not normally terribly engaging of the attention. So if you try this, you will probably find that in short order your mind begins to drift. This is entirely natural. The idea is to notice the drift and then return the focus to the in-breath and the out-breath. It sounds easy, but it actually takes considerable practice to do this consistently. The focus on the breathing remains a kind of anchor to bring me back to the mindfulness state of mind. Before beginning the exercise, I like to find a safe place where I can have some solid contact with a natural object. I like to sit on a rock or lean up against a tree, for example. I then close my eyes, focus on the breath, and try to clear my mind. After a few minutes, I let my attention wander to the sounds, the scents, and the tactile sensations that are coming to me from the world around me. I try not to analyze them too much, although I might label them. Often, I need to return to the breathing to bring myself back to the present moment. In time, I open my eyes, look around, and see what natural object captures my attention. I then may sit with it for a while. I have been amazed at how a combination of this sort of activity and an understanding of context can help me have enduring experiences. In trying to sum all this up, I am reminded of a passage by the poet Gary Snyder. He once wrote that the wild requires that we learn the terrain, nod to the plants, animals, and birds, ford the streams, cross the ridges, and tell a good story when we get back home. I hope you have lots of good stories.